The War of the Spanish Succession was one of the most important wars in European history, but it was also one of the most forgotten ones. In a nutshell, when the Spanish King Charles II, this inbred creature, died childless in 1700, the French fought to install Philip V, grandson of Louis XIV, as the new King of Spain, leading to a Bourbon-controlled Spanish Empire, while the Austrians fought to install Archduke Charles of Austria from the House of Habsburg as the King of Spain. After 13 years of fighting, the war ended with a compromise. Philip would be allowed to become King of Spain, but would have to renounce his place in the French succession tree, and Spanish territories in Europe would be significantly reduced. But what if that didn't happen? What if instead of the compromise peace deal of our timeline, the French were victorious? It is crucial to understand the French strategy in this war. France and Spain fought against Austria, the Netherlands, and Great Britain. The French strategy was to march onto Vienna and force the Austrians to capitulate. They got support from the Bavarians, who fought alongside the French, and the Hungarians, who launched a major uprising against the Habsburg Empire. This plan almost worked, but the French and Bavarians got decisively defeated at the Battle of Blenheim. In this timeline, the French win this battle or it never happens, and the Austrian Empire is soon forced to surrender. Hungarian independence is secured, and the British and Dutch are forced to make peace. The peace treaty sees Philip V becoming King of Spain while keeping his claim on the French line of succession. As a compromise between the Bourbons and Habsburgs, and as compensation for their war efforts, the Spanish lowlands are ceded to the Bavarians. For now, peace in Europe is restored, and everyone except the Austrians can be okay with the new map of Europe. However, things will soon change. Here, we have to look at the French line of succession, but I promise I will keep it simple. By the time Louis XIV would die, his son, the Grand Dauphin, would be the first in line to inherit the French throne. Second in line would be his grandson, the Petit Dauphin. Philip V would only be number 3 in line, and would only inherit the French throne if the Petit Dauphin failed to foster an heir beforehand. That means that the chance of an actual Franco-Spanish Union happening is very low. However, as fate would have it, both Dauphins would tragically pass away before Louis XIV himself, and by the time he too died in 1715, the Petit Dauphin's child, Louis XV, was only 5 years old, and it's not hard to imagine a 5-year-old child, mysteriously disappearing, making Philip V the king of both France and Spain. I can't predict the specifics, but let's be real, we all know where this is going. Compared to Louis XV, Philip V would be a significantly better and more effective ruler. Just as in our timeline, he would strive for greater centralization and economic improvement, which would mostly be successful. Meanwhile, with the Austrian Empire being so weak, the War of the Austrian Succession, if it even happens at all, would be a minor conflict at most. There is no War of the Quadruple Alliance. Russia still defeats Sweden in the Great Northern War and establishes itself as a new major European power. I have no idea how an alternate 7 Years' War would look like. Perhaps until his death in 1746 Philip V would encourage more settlement in New France compared to our timeline, leading to an inconclusive outcome in North America instead of the total British victory of our timeline. Perhaps in this timeline there would even be a scramble for India. However, I still see the Prussians coming out on top in Europe, especially with Austria being so much weaker than in our world. Maybe this alternate 7 Years' War also sees Savoy kicking the Bourbons out of Italy, and ceding over some border territories in return. There would be no French Revolution, which means no Napoleon. This alone changes Europe in so many ways that it's almost impossible to predict. So from here on, take anything I say with a grain of salt, as I can only make educated guesses about how Europe and the world would look like from this point on. Prussia and Russia still partition Poland. I see absolutely no reason why they shouldn't. With the Austrian Empire no longer being a great power, and assuming that Prussia still goes for German unification, Germany unites significantly earlier than in our timeline. I don't see the Bavarians being able to compete with the Prussians in the long term. Perhaps Austria would even be a part of this new German superstate. Without the Napoleonic Wars, it's possible that the Dutch hold on to Sri Lanka and South Africa, but that's by no means guaranteed. Somewhere during the 19th century, the British, French and Spanish colonies in the Americas inevitably get independence, but how exactly is completely different than in our own timeline. Perhaps Canada doesn't even exist in this world, or maybe Latin America is significantly wealthier than in our world thanks to better economic development. With Belgium being ruled by the Catholic Bavarians, a Belgian revolution is very unlikely, meaning that Belgium never exists in this world. I still see the House of Savoy being able to unite Italy somewhere during the 19th century. The scramble for Africa, if it even happens, is likely completely different than in our world, but I cannot in good faith predict the exact borders of this alternate Berlin Conference. Without the Austrian Empire, the Russians would also be the only ones to push the Ottomans out of the Balkans. This is my prediction of how Europe would look like around 1900. Trying to predict World War I in this scenario is almost impossible, and it's likely completely different thanks to the lack of a Habsburg Empire, but that won't stop me from trying. I'm assuming the main war is still Germany against France and Russia, with Britain ready to support whoever appears to be losing, not wanting either side to fully dominate the continent. The loyalty of minor nations is based on what territories they wish to gain from whom, and on a "the enemy of my enemy is my friend" mindset. These are two possible outcomes of this alternate Great War, based on which side is victorious. However, this is so far away from the original point of divergence that I cannot make any realistic predictions, so this is where I'll leave it for now. Comment down below what you think would happen. Cheers.